Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Booley. I'm one of the co-hosts of the Untapped Energy Meetup. This is our last one of our year. On behalf of Tim Chan and I would like to welcome you to this event. We're very excited to have everybody here tonight. And you're going to see the path to a data-focused career, or actually you will see multiple paths to a data-focused career. Unfortunately, one of our keynote speakers, Ian Austin, was unable to make it tonight, but we will try to reschedule him for some time in the new year. We'll start off with Jeremy Zhao today, and he's been a process engineer for the past 10 years, working on projects in well sites, pipelines, natural gas facilities, and oil batteries. He's also been involved in the community engagement and many volunteering roles over the years as well. He's in Australia right now, so let's not hate him for that. Hopefully he'll get to show some of his background, real green background, as opposed to our fake ones that we get to show. But he's dived into the world of data science headfirst as a potential transition and bridge from his current role, much like a lot of us. So take it away, Jeremy.
Going to take it in a slightly different direction, make it a little bit more jovial given the current situation, and hopefully I also will be stepping on some toes. It's just a typical Jeremy fashion. So this is kind of my start, and these were the ingredients. We had one pandemic, kind of one midlife crisis way too early, and one oil and gas industry that's going through some massive changes. And also my love of the community and engagement really got me started into the data world by joining the Data for Good Calgary group here. This picture was just me replicating kind of the COVID situation and basically just copying what the presenters were doing in order to just see kind of the interesting things that came out of it. And so going with the kind of the Lord of the Rings theme that you saw in the beginning slide, this is kind of my Helm's Deep moment where basically against all odds, I joined the SPE / Untapped Energy Datathon back in July, August. And, we ended up, getting the first prize and we were both shocked by that. But at the same time, my group and I kind of reflected to see kind of what happened, what went well, what didn't go well. These are some of the lessons learned where we learned that coding was just a means to the final product. It wasn't the primary feature of what we were doing. The results had to have some kind of purpose. Without that purpose or meaning, it's really all for nothing, right? You're not really doing anything with it. Sometimes it might be for fun, and that's okay, but when you're serious about certain projects, it really comes down to, what are you trying to get across within the limited time frame that you have? We had our own failures as well during the project. It wasn't, the magical presentation that you saw on YouTube. And that allowed us to learn. We weren't able to use certain information, but we actually learned from that. We went, hey, this is not good information. We're not going to include it. And including information for the sake of information was not useful. We played to our strength. Each of the members had a specific role that was very important in formulating kind of our final project, if you will. And I got to meet other people. If there was no pandemic, I would not be right here, right now, talking to you. And I wouldn't have met some great people in my group. The next thing I kind of did was one of the participants in the SPE group said, hey, there's this like machine learning challenge. And so I didn't know anything about machine learning. I didn't do the other portion of the Duck Datathon about machine learning. I said, hey, what the heck? Who cares? Let's just try it out and see what happens. So kind of here's my journey. I didn't know anything about machine learning. The first thing I did was they gave us a template and I just submitted that template, see what happens, and it got a better ranking than half the submissions already. So that was a great start, just fluking my way through. And then I started playing around with trying different things. And sorry, this challenge was about predicting lithologies in offshore Norwegian wells by using machine learning. So they had different categories and we had to try and use a sample data set to try and see if we can predict the different formations within that lithology. So I tried different things because I'm not really a petrophysicist or a geophysicist of that nature. I'm a process engineer. So I just kind of said, hey, what if I tried this variable? Would this help or not? And it kind of threw apparently all the conventional wisdom out the door, because it got me a better result. And I wasn't afraid of doing things that people would have assumed weren't going to help. Like, I guess the coordinates of where the well was actually played a huge role in predicting the lithologies. I would guess and I would fail every day. There were moments, and then at the end it kind of got depressing because I ranked like number 31, and only the top 30 got to submit their code. But I still placed 31 and they still asked for it. So I said, hey, what the heck? I'll submit. And I did. And here's, if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, here's Sam Wise with his light, as he's fighting the spider, and he was able to defeat the spider. I ended up placing top 10. There were 329 teams, 148 solutions, 31 submissions, including my own. But half of them got disqualified because they could not be easily read. So lessons number 1 was follow the instructions. The instructions are probably the most important part of anything. If any kind of challenge you want involved in, what your client wants you to do, you probably want to follow the instructions, or else you're going to miss the point. And lessons number 2, this is a quote from Adventure Time. If you have kids, or if you're a nerd like me, sucking at something is the first step towards being sort of good at something. And I just kept sucking until I got somewhere with my machine learning code. So, and then after that, I participated in the Data for Good National Marathon, not marathon, Datathon. And so we were able to work on a Datathon for the Nature Conservancy of Canada. And 12-hour Datathons are really hard, and working across time zones is very, very hard. And I also did machine learning with my fantasy hockey pool, where I actually don't know that much about hockey, but lessons learned, it ranked Dave Riddich really high, but he's actually a backup goalie for the next season, so it's not going to work out for me, because that's kind of the flaw. And then the machine learning kind of confused. There were 2 Sebastian Ahos, so it's like, and they couldn't figure it out, so I had to learn from that as well. So these were just kind of side projects that I ended up doing after the machine learning as well. So this is the slide where I'm going to step on toes a little bit. I think these are some of my worries about transitioning, or maybe even getting into data science. I talked to one individual and he said, hey, everybody's going into data science right now, and I'm just worried that we're going to go from one oversaturated market, which is basically the oil and gas industry now, to another. My own personal worry is I'm not changing careers to change the world. I think for me personally, and I'm only speaking for myself, I think that's a very important part. If I'm really changing careers, I want to change to something that will really change the world. If I'm going into data science, I'm in industries, and this is the part where both tech and oil and gas have still huge hurdles, in my opinion, is that we still lag in gender equality, concerns about climate change, boardroom workplace diversity. Is Alberta still the right place to find work? There's lots of unicorn jobs. I know in previous Untapped Energy meetups, we talked about unicorn jobs, and there are lots of job postings, but there's none for somebody like me. And so my focus at this point is not so much about self-confidence, but about self-compassion. And what that means is I'm still confident, but I know when I'm failing, or when I'm doing something wrong, or something that's not going to work out for me. And these worries are my own, but I do know other people share these worries and concerns as well. And so I think I just wanted to end it on, failure is okay. With the Lord of the Rings theme, Frodo Baggins, if you watch the movies, didn't actually succeed in destroying that one ring. He succumbs to that one ring at the very end. And it's just by chance that the one ring was destroyed. But we don't watch the movies just because we wanted to see him fail, or just to see what the ending was about, right? It was about the entire journey and what you gain from that experience. And so don't let that failure, something that doesn't work out for you, and maybe data science doesn't work out for me, but it doesn't define who I am or what I'm capable of doing.
And so now we'll move on to our first keynote speaker, Christopher Liu. Christopher, like me, comes from an oil and gas background with a BSc in geology from the University of Calgary. He worked as a field geologist for 7 years and made the move to data analytics this year. Through a government-sponsored program called Edge Up, he pivoted careers and is now a newly minted data analyst working at PBS Systems, an automotive software company.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm going to talk about my career pivot journey from PGO to data analyst. Went to U of C and got a Bachelor of Science in Geology. So I graduated around 2011 and things were pretty good at that time. So it wasn't too hard to get a job. I found a job relatively quickly in Wellsite and worked there for 7 years. As you know, things were good up until around that 2015 mark, and things started getting really uncertain. Oil prices dropped like a rock, and it hasn't really recovered since then. Work was really inconsistent. I was never really sure when I'd go back to site or not. So this led me to pursue new horizons because things weren't working very well. In the meantime, I did work at a provincial lab as a lab assistant just to do something in the meantime, but I wasn't really sure what to do at that point. So I started looking up different career paths because I didn't think geology was sustainable, but maybe it doesn't in the short term, but yeah. After weighing some career options, I stumbled into data analytics. So I was starting to just look at tech careers mostly. So data analytics seemed interesting. One of the reasons why is geology already deals with data sets. We look for trends. We already can kind of see what is good and bad data. Most of us are pretty good with detail. We have strong investigative skills, looking at all those well logs and such. And also personally for myself, I had a pretty keen interest in technology, and data analytics pretty much applies to a large range of industries. So it's a little bit more flexible than just narrowing down to oil and gas. So even though I started looking at these programs, I wasn't really sure what to get into, or like I should go into like a institutional program or just try to learn everything online. But a friend suggested to me a program called Edge Up. So Edge Up was a pilot project through the government, a 4-month program for people displaced out of oil and gas to try to transition to tech. So it seemed like a pretty good fit for what I was trying to do. So I applied to that and somehow got accepted out of a bunch of people that applied. Not really sure why they picked me, but sure. So this started in March. And as you know, when it was March, things went crazy and we all got locked down. So I only had in-person class for a week. And then we all got thrown into the online world, which was very abrupt and confusing. And I missed like my first class because I didn't even know that we went online. So it was kind of crazy, but it forced us to adapt really quickly to the new online world. It was kind of cool. So at this program, they taught us some really quick crash course on like Microsoft Access, SQL, ETL via SSMS, Power BI, Python, and a little bit of Azure stuff. And they also had a nice capstone project at the end, tackling a real life business problem with a real life company. So that was kind of nice. After that, I focused more on getting some more education after the 4 months of Edge Up. So ICTC was actually also part of Edge Up. They gave us career coaching tips, which was really nice about how to write your resume and cover letters and all that. I also did a data camp course which was pretty helpful, I thought. It's not for everybody. The layout is kind of odd, and it's really like a hand-holdy kind of online course, but it did tell me learn a lot more about SQL. And also took some random LinkedIn courses, which are also, I think, pretty good. And, oh, that's me. This is also our edge of class, some of us. Getting the job. So I'd say job hunting itself is basically like a full-time career. There's a lot you gotta like look out for. Tailoring your cover letter and resume to the job posting itself is pretty key, I think. Trying to throw out generic resumes and cover letters don't really seem to work out very well from what I tried. You gotta focus on taking some keywords from the posting and throwing in your resume. Definitely company research is important to know what the company you're applying for does. I felt it was important to brand yourself as well, like what makes you different from the other applicants and what reasons would that company have to hire you. So definitely as a career pivot move, I would focus on my knowledge with working with data already as a kind of bonus compared to like a new grad that doesn't really work with real life data. Also networking. This is a hit and miss, I think. Networking worked sometimes for me. Some people were actually friendly. Some people just ghost you and never speak to you, which is kind of discouraging. But for the most part, the people that do talk to you, it's a really good experience, I think. You get to learn a lot from them as well. So for interviews, nowadays interviews I think are actually much easier than before because you don't actually have to go in person and you can just have basically everything in front of you that you could possibly refer to. So like the company website, the job posting, your own resume, if you don't even know what's on it, and the cover letter that you submitted. So they ask you questions and you're pretty prepared. So I think it's actually nice that we don't have to do in person in the meantime. Surprisingly, from what I had in interviews, technical knowledge wasn't really focused on too much. A lot of interviews were mostly on soft skills and how you fit with the company. That's what kind of questions I got asked a lot. So I even asked my boss after a couple of months, why did you pick me out of like other people with probably even more educated or like more experience than what I have, which is basically zero. And he just said that he felt like I was the best fit on the team, and the other people were not, even though they all had similar or better qualifications. So I thought that was very interesting that he said that. And also personal touch. I also got asked a bunch of times in interviews, tell me something unique about yourself, which kind of, I don't know, can be a bit of a strange question because, you know, everyone's got like different hobbies and such, but I think that's nice to definitely have an answer and not be confused about that. I just said I built computers for fun, and surprisingly, my boss said he did the same thing. So that kind of worked out. The actual job. So as you heard at the very beginning, I worked for a company called PBS, but not that PBS, this PBS, which no one's ever heard of, neither have I. But they've actually been around apparently as a local company in Calgary for like 25 years. from what I heard, they actually didn't get like really big until about 5 or 6 years ago, and they started hiring a lot more people. And they're like a company about 200. They do automotive dealer management system software. So basically, when you go to a dealership and they're on their computer and such, they do all that backend software of dealing with service, parts, accounting, and sales, and all that. So my role at this company as a data analyst is just to do ETL using .NET applications built in-house and using SQL Server and Access. So I basically transfer any data from whatever previous system they were using or previous competitors' software into PBS's software, into their SQL database. So we deal with a bunch of different data types. We can deal with a nice SQL database, CSV files, even Access databases, and sometimes really strange files called AS400, which to my understanding is just like some really ancient text format from IBM. So yeah, that's what I do. And it's pretty fun. It's not bad. Like the actual SQL work is a little bit more complicated than what you've learned in like any sort of online courses, but it's surprisingly rewarding work when you can solve problems just strictly using query language. Here's a picture of my desk, which I will now no longer see because of work from home orders, but I thought it was just a nice little picture. We have usually a lot of windows open because we multitask a lot and work with multiple dealerships at the same time. Here's a little sample of some SQL query that we use. So here it's actually just a select query from just selecting customers actually. So as you can see, it's a lot more complicated than what you learn in like any sort of online course. There's lots of case statements, some trimmings, who knows how many kind of joins are going on here, lots of other things going on. So, but it's interesting. This is what PBS's software looks like. So this is what they use at the dealerships, and we just deal with all their backend systems and make this all work. Some final thoughts of my journey. Trying to narrow down your focus and sticking with learning path. So for me, I know data analytics is actually a lot of different things. So I focused more on SQL itself instead of more of like the data visualization or even like machine learning or all of that other stuff. Why SQL in particular? That's the only part that I felt I was good at being exposed to at EdgeUp. So the good thing about EdgeUp is they kind of just dip your toes into all these different things. And I felt SQL was something that I caught on much easier than all the other stuff. Being patient with yourself and others, especially when trying to network or even just applying to jobs and never getting a response. Getting rejected happens, but the final point leads into having a buddy to share your journey with. It makes it a lot easier, I think. So I had someone from EdgeUp, Linda, I think she's also in this talk, as my buddy to share my journey with. And it keeps things much more bearable and interesting, especially with everything going on and everyone trying to flood into the same job and feeling confused at what to even look for nowadays.
Triumphs and challenges. When I started, I'm kind of like a Mark. I'm a geophysicist. My knowledge to apply to something else. I was trying to summarize what triumphs and challenges I had over the last year and a half. What happened since the last Flash Talk is I had a few interviews, and one of the interviews panned out. I moved to Edmonton, and I'm currently working for a company called Canada. Canada is the only public company that owns dealerships, and they use a lot of analytics to figure out how to more efficiently sell cars and how to make the most money. So now they're restructuring the whole database system, and they will be creating new dashboards. That's where I come in as a Tableau developer. And then working again on visualizations just with a different product is really interesting to me as a geophysicist, and I'm really thankful that I've been able to find something that I can capitalize my previous skills to a new industry. What surprised me the most is that I found a group of people who I've never met before, and I found them through searching for a job and joining different groups. And Meetup have been really encouraging, able to help me with this job and help me in a process, even with the interview, figuring out a salary bracket, people who don't know you, willing to help you because they've probably been in the same position. Don't give up and try to use any opportunity you can, because prior to this, I always thought that I had a good position, I had good salary. Maybe if I apply for something, I'm not going to get it. In the last maybe year, I applied for a few different training courses that required scholarship, and I thought there's no way I'll be able to get a scholarship, but I applied and I got it. If you think you don't have enough, just apply, because applying doesn't require a lot of effort from your side, but you might get a big reward in the end. If you see a job posting that lists 20 things and you only have 2, still apply, because you never know what people are looking for, and maybe they're looking for those 2 things that you have. Just apply for anything that is sort of within your box of interest. And then once you do that, at least you start getting interviews, and it will give you more encouragement that you're actually getting somewhere. It gave me a lot of confidence that I'm actually getting somewhere versus applying for 3 jobs, perfect jobs, and not getting anything. A few programs that I looked into were quite expensive. They had lists of requirements that people need to meet. One of them was, for example, you needed to be on AI in the last year. Well, I haven't. And I applied for the program anyways, and I actually received the money because the rules can be banned for certain candidates apparently. So I just applied, and even though they said there's 80% chance you're not going to get it, I felt like I didn't check any of the boxes. It doesn't hurt to ask, and I was lucky to receive the scholarship, and I'm really happy I went through the program. If you're looking for something and if you feel you don't have all the requirements, just jump and apply.
Roman is a senior data analyst at Symend with more than 5 years experience developing, curating, and engineering data with Python and SQL. He's an active volunteer for Data for Good, helping author a white paper outlining how statistical methods could be used to predict housing first program abandonment. He specializes in spatial analysis and is a strong advocate for using open source technologies like PostgreSQL and Apache Zeppelin to make sense of data. Roman participated on hackathon winning themes that were Trimble Transportation Mobility's 2018 hackathon and Trimble's 2019 Datathon champions. He's a loving husband who spends his time coding at home with his cat and outside bicycles or skis when he has time away from studying his master's. And I've actually never heard Roman speak before. We've been on the same WhatsApp channel for our masters for the last year or so, but I'm very thrilled to finally hear him speak. Take it away, Roman.
Yeah. One second. I am definitely Zoom challenged. Can you please indicate if you can hear me?
We can hear you and we can see your slides. You look great.
Thank you very much. Well, it is my pleasure to be speaking with everyone here. What a great bunch of speakers that have just came before me, and it looks like it's a full house. Please believe me, this is my pleasure, and I'm truly honored to be speaking here. So, just like how Jeremy was talking earlier about failing, that's that's kind of the entire thesis of what I'm going to be talking about. There hasn't been one failure that I've had that actually grew into success in one form or another. And I'd like to share what I'm calling a retrospective roadmap in 3 parts. I specifically talk about 3 major, or maybe not so major, to varying degrees of failures, and how I succeeded from them. Let's dive in. So, just a really quick overview. I'm going to give a short introduction of myself. Who is Roman? Where did he come from? I'm going to then go through the 3 different sections in my retrospective roadmap, and I'll hopefully leave everyone here with some curated advice that I hope is helpful to everyone here, and then we'll open the floor to some questions. Here I am. There's a picture of me from 2018, and I have a very abbreviated timeline of how I got to where I am, where I was hired at Symend. So I was hired at a couple of organizations during my undergrad as a GIS co-op student because I was studying geography. So I'm going to define an important term here I'm going to be using a lot in the beginning of my presentation, and that's GIS. So GIS is an acronym for Geographic Information Systems, and really all it means, I'm sorry to those who know what it means, but to those who don't, a geographic information system is a software or a suite of softwares that let you store, manipulate, query, analyze, append spatial specific data in one of its many forms. It comes in lots. And I should make a note here that I didn't even start in data. Sure, I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Geography, but I entered university as an English major. And fast forward to 2020, I was hired as a senior data analyst with a startup in Calgary named Symend. One more note, I'm a Data for Good volunteer as well, Jeremy, but it's actually with the Edmonton chapter led by Fariza. And we've had a lot of success in trying to model housing first program abandonments with one of the clients. So let's move on here into part 1, diving in, also known as my first job. And if you want to be great at something, you can't not suck at it first. So this is what I was used to. This is software. This is GIS software made by a company named Esri. This particular software is pretty much ubiquitous amongst medium and large organizations throughout North America and in post-secondary educational institutions as well. Pretty much as a geography major, the only GIS that I learned was with Esri products. I was fortunate enough to land my first job outside of university, not long after I graduated, to do open source GIS. And you know what, I thought, how different can this really be? There was a lab where we had to use QGIS. That's the most popular open source GIS desktop software that's available. And in this lab, I got an A in it. Like, how hard can this really be? Like, this should be like a slam dunk. This is actually what I had to use. For those in the audience who are familiar with the database PostgreSQL, might recognize pgadmin as being the antiquated database administration tool that came with it. So this is what I was given at GeoTrack. I was given, yep, we do stuff in the database, so here you go. Because the GIS software we used, sure, it was QGIS, what was mainly using the spatial extension for the database Postgres. So yeah, I did do a lot of database stuff, and it was diving into the deep end. SQL is hard when you don't really know anything except how to write conditional statements and where clauses. But thankfully, that's not the only tool I had. I also got to use trusty QGIS, the open source GIS. So I was specifically hired at GeoTrack because of my knowledge with Python. It's something that I built up through the years and ended up using more and more throughout my co-op internships. There's this one project that I was working on and off throughout the first couple of years at GeoTrack. And the problem was that we had to take GPS points from modems that we sold to customers and try to make brand new roads off of a specific clustering of points that are off of our road network. So in the image here, for those who have not seen a GIS before, roads are just lines, and that's just how they're shown. And we have the GPS points that are just the points here. So the problem that I was given really was fourfold trying to generate roads based off message points. First, we had to isolate message points that drove off-road from the ones that drove on the road. Secondly, we had to ensure that clusters of message points were tight enough to ensure that we could have an algorithm generate what we called new lease roads, because oftentimes the roads were so new, they're just gravel roads really going to well sites often, and they didn't exist in national or provincial databases. Third, we had to generate a line string. That's what these geometries are called, not polylines for the Esri crowd, from the point cluster. And then 4, we had to clean the resulting line string and split the trunk road that it attached to in such a way to complete the topology. The sole technology that I used for this really was SQL. And really, I was given an anchor, and I was pushed into the deep end of the pool. I was told to swim. It wasn't easy. So what happened next? Sure, I essentially failed at this first project. But what happened was I fell completely head over heels for open source software, and mainly the database I was using, which was Postgres. You can take it with a grain of salt. This is definitely my opinion. But I firmly believe that if you want to do spatial analysis on any reasonable size of data, meaning less than tens of terabytes, really Postgres and PostGIS are the tools you should be looking into. Well, what else happened? I also took success away from these failures by learning, by this trial by fire, that showed me that I'd end up using SQL more in my career than I used Python, despite knowing Python much better than I knew SQL when I was hired. All right, part 2. Education, aspirations, and skilling up. Let's fast forward a few years. SQL is now under my belt. The year? 2017, 2018. I've heard about a new term and an associated Python library, machine learning and TensorFlow. Looking back today, these two ideas, machine learning and TensorFlow, along with having SQL under my belt by jumping into the deep end, completely changed my shape for the future. It was right up my alley to have a computer do all the heavy lifting. Ask anybody who knows me, even a little bit. I can never stand to do manual work on a computer. And I was honestly completely enamored with having a computer learn to do something. I was hungry. I was hungry to learn more about machine learning. And ever since I graduated from my undergrad, I was prepared to go into graduate education. It's something that I always really wanted to keep in my mind. So at the time, my then girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, were interested in the idea of moving overseas. And I investigated taking up courses at the Technical University in Munich. It seemed at the time that admission was stringent, and I was explicitly told that I needed certain prerequisites from one of their own programs before I could study. Okay, no big deal. I thought that was kind of out of the picture, so I turned my focus towards universities in Canada. I rounded up references from my undergraduate days, and I reached out and applied to both UBC and U of T in a Master's of Computer Science. Fast forward a couple of months, and I was rejected. Looking back, it really isn't that surprising, having just been a geography major, trying to jump into a computer science graduate degree. But I was really dejected. I lay low for about a year, and I largely forgot about more education. Really, though, the feeling came back, and it was essentially redoubled. I was reminded of my education desires for graduate school, and the feelings came back redoubled. I decided, literally out of the blue, like, I'm not joking, guys. I found a Udacity course called Udacity's Deep Learning Nano Degree, and this is completely out of character. I signed up for it the day I saw it. It was actually really amazing. I learned how to program neural networks with PyTorch. I made convolutional neural networks. I programmed autoencoders, recurrent neural networks with LSTM blocks, long short-term memory, and I made GANs, generative adversarial networks. While I was taking the nano degree, I also applied to an online program from the Georgia Institute of Technology. In my application, I included all the statistical things I was learning from my nano degree. And I thoroughly believe that that was the final step I needed to take to secure admission into the program. Just a few months later, as I was still undertaking the nano degree, I received an offer to be accepted to the online Masters of Science in Analytics. And so the success that I ended up finding after my abysmal and lowest depths of failure from being rejected from graduate school ended up enabling me to grow up and find what I wanted to do a lot better with Georgia Tech. So part 3. As we move forward through my timeline in obtaining more of a career in data, I was eventually laid off, as many Albertans have in the oil and gas sector. My role was consolidated on September 1st, just earlier this year, from Trimble Oil and Gas Services, and I had to find a new job. I applied to many organizations, and I was fortunate enough to have several interviews, but only one ended up giving me an offer. On the job hunt, I kept several detailed notes. I included a cover letter in only about 7 of the 30 applications that I sent out. And I also received 7 replies to move forward in varying degrees. It could have been a take-home test, a meet and greet, or it could have just led right to an interview right on the spot, or on the spot. All of my positive replies ended up coming from simply submitting generally a 1-page resume. And I also had success I had a 100% success rate, you could say, in my one application of a 2-page resume. So that was kind of interesting to see. I ended up using the free trial for LinkedIn Premium as well. I think that it was definitely worth using. I don't think I'd get the $35 of value out of a regular membership with LinkedIn. But the free trial is great. At the very least, because it helps you negotiate a salary if you're given an offer by letting you search a position by region, and it gives you an average or a predicted salary, what you ought to be making. I wanted to include my resume because one thing that I thought I failed at in my job hunt was my resume. This is actually a pretty spicy one-page resume that I made that I tried to have pizzazz and really capture the attention of whoever I was applying to. I have an ordinary 2-page resume. That's just a completely formatted Word document, nothing special. But this was kind of more interesting to talk to. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but if you guys have questions, we can talk about those later. I wanted to talk briefly about some of the organizations that I had interviews with that tested me and that either rejected me or granted me success. So that hired me. So some of the interesting things here is no one company does interviewing the same. With Spotlight Data, I was interviewed by the CTO who asked me really tough, canned San Francisco-like data science questions. What did he ask me? He asked me, for example, how I could swap 2 integers without using additional storage. I was set up for failure in this interview. At Thinkific, I was given lots of people questions. For example, describe how your boss would describe your strengths. At CPCS, I was interviewed as a spatial data scientist, and they asked me about a project portfolio and how I would end up going about doing spatial analysis. The only organization that interviewed me twice was Symend, and that's who ultimately hired me. I was given the interview by my boss and then by someone else who has worked there for a very long time. And I was given both a combination of technical and non-technical questions. On this as well, I also want to quickly talk about tests, but because it came up. And while I don't have Mob Squad up here, I was also given a test earlier this year about writing, I was given a HackerRank test, and I had to write really perform in Python. I was given 3 separate questions I had to fill out functions for in an hour. And I think the questions were more tailored for a data engineer because I had to pull out a lot of tricks with NumPy to speed up a lot of math in order to get all the stuff to run before HackerRank timed my test out. So ultimately, I found success with Symend after, man, it was tough to find a job, but I also recognize that I was lucky, unlike a lot of people who are also laid off. So I have some closing remarks here as well. Overall, on my journey to continue and grow a career in data, I feel like I've done everything right. I think the takeaway here is stuff like this just takes time. I've taken the advice from what I've read about in a career in data. I've made a blog. I've participated in some Kaggle competitions. I've participated in hackathons. I've read interesting books about machine learning and statistics. While I feel like these are definitely useful, I don't really feel like they've been enough to put me over the edge as part of my journey to a career in data. These really just got me started on the transition. They're kind of table stakes. And I'm not saying not to do these things, because I really think there's value in them. But don't spend all of your energy in doing projects like this unless you also know how to market yourself very well. I don't. And that's something I struggle with. honestly, most of my success in making a career of data has been from having contacts in high places. And really, everyone here already has a leg up on me there, because that's something that everyone in the meetup already practices. Thank you.